One of the hardest things to do in Honkai Star Rail is to actually choose between waifus, and in this video, we have 3, and all of them are meta. So the first things first, Harmony class is really good because they form the backbone of every single team comp that scales off with attack. As of global launch, most of the characters in Honkai Star Rail will be scaling off with attack, with a few exceptions but more defender class units scaling off of defense, and some healers like Natasha scaling off with HP. But of course, there is one caveat, and they are all excelling in very different areas, and in this video we aim to cover what exactly makes these 3 different from each other. I'm not trying to tell you which one to choose and which is better, we already did that in our tier list videos, but for now we're going to just state the facts on these 3 characters and you can decide for yourself. I'll leave the pain to choosing waifus up to you. I'll give my thoughts towards the end of the video on what I think as well. And first up we have Tingyun, a new character in CBT3, and right here I actually have limited secret information of what the management team looked like when they were deciding this character. So they thought of Raiden Shogun in Genshin Impact and they thought of Miyabi in Zenless Zone Zero, and they just put them together and they have this character. And I'm not even talking about her design, who's like a fox lady kind of design, but I'm also talking about her kit in general. So similar to Raiden Shogun, she has the energy regen in terms of her ultimate where she batteries the target, and similar to Miyabi, she also gets that damage potential as well in terms of a damage dealer. She increases damage of a single target using her skill, and of course scaling off her own attack and gives them this blessed status. And when they attack, she follow-ups up with an attack, and when the blessed unit is attacking, they're vice versa. They basically, long story short, they are like this wheezing right here, the Pokemon, where if one attacks, the other one also follows up. And in terms of who she works well with, if you look at this graph, because she scales off with the character's attack, she will actually work well with characters higher up on this list in terms of their attack scaling. So a lot of 5-star characters, if she's using to bless and soul link each other together, they will do a lot of damage and she will benefit from it a lot as well in terms of the scaling. A character that I think will use her really well is a character that doesn't care about speed, wants some energy regeneration to keep uptime on the ultimate, as well as a pretty decent attack. And none other, I think the very best character for her in terms of synergy is definitely Clara in terms of the 737 base speed, because Clara goes more of a counter attacking style, doesn't really care too much about speed. But as you can see and you can tell, Tingyun actually works very well with the 2 other characters on this list, Asta and Bronya, since she scales off with attack and also buffs energy regen, which the other 2 characters don't buff as well. Now let's look at the next character. Here we have Bronya. So in terms of a skill, she has this 100% push, which basically means that no matter what speed your units are, if they are very slow or very fast, instantly they are pushed up to next in line. This really bypasses the entire base speed requirement of the unit and doesn't really matter as much as well. Very strong, especially if you want to have a hyper carry role as well. Her ultimate is where her AoE nature comes in. It buffs the whole entire party's team by a 60%, massive 60% attack, with a crit damage buff with scaling based on Bronya's crit damage as well. And for those of you who haven't read her full kit, she basically gets a 100% crit rate in her basic attack, which is the only thing that does damage in the kit. And it's very easy to, for example, push beyond 200% crit damage if you just stack crit on this character that can go all the way to the late game as well. Now we have Asta, and I put this image here of Bennett here as really the best description of what I think she really is. Not because I think she's as broken as Bennett. She got nerfed quite a bit since the closed beta test, but she's a 4-star character similar to Bennett, and most of all, she actually can be obtained for free as of some of the beta information that we have. Might change come official launch, but we'll see about that. So what makes her strong is she basically boosts the whole team's speed by 45 amount. Very massive, considering that the average speed of all characters in the game currently is like 101, so it's like a 50% speed buff based on their base speed. It's a really huge amount, and it's the entire party including herself as well. She also gives up to a 50% attack buff with her talent Astrometry based on the number of time her charging stack hits multiple enemies. Very strong 50% in a passive talent, and when she's on the field she also buffs fire damage is increased. She does very good fire break damage, unlike Bronya, who doesn't really offer that much wind break damage and it's more of a buffer. Asta is good in the sense that she is a 4-star, she gives a solid amount of speed to the whole party, passive buff to everything, whereas Bronya is like focusing on one character in terms of pushing it up, guaranteed to act next in line. Asta is like everyone let's come together kind of character. And I guess the biggest question, seeing these 2 characters, Asta and Bronya, people have always been asking what are the difference between these 2 characters and when do you use which one. So I actually use my amazing art skills to actually design some team comps that can illustrate when each character is actually better than the other. Now, as you can see my marvelous art here in terms of Asta, we're going to talk about this first, and I think this is the first team that Asta really excels in versus compared to Bronya. So we have Asta herself, and it's a triple DPS lineup where all three need some sort of speed scaling. So for example, let's just give some example. We have Herta, we have CD, as well as Kafka, who all generally scale off with attack very well, all DPS heavy, and all likes some sort of speed so that they can proc their follow-up attacks or maybe their ability to act again. And right here, I only gave Kafka the dress because she's my favorite character, so obviously there must be some form of favoritism. So one of the biggest advantages of Asta versus Bronya is she gives a lot of attack and speed to the rest of the team, which means she's a very strong early game character, because for Bronya, she scales off with crit damage, which not many characters have 100% crit rate to start off the game. Maybe only Yanqing might be the only character with that 100% crit rate very early on, and maybe Herta can creep closer to that level. But for a vast majority of characters, most of them won't have that crit damage to utilize Bronya's kit. And the second team comp that we have where Asta likely is going to outperform, of course, is a unit for like a triple or a 4 fire team, because Asta provides additional fire damage when she's on the field as well. And when she buffs the whole team, she, in terms of speed, in terms of damage, all 4 characters can act as like a triple DPS in this sense. All 3 of them do relatively good amounts of damage, and Asta herself does okay amounts of damage as well. This way the whole team moves faster, does more damage, and all scales very well with all buffs that she provides. So I think these are the 2 significant teams that Asta outperforms in, and really I think the biggest plus point of her is she's a free character. Like, there's nothing more that we can ask to get a free character, and if you pick up Asta and you skip Bronya, for example, you could always use your choice character or maybe your re-rolling target to be maybe another long shelf character. For example, you could pick up Welt, a debuffing kind of character as well, instead of Bronya, since Welt doesn't really have alternatives in terms of comparison, whereas Bronya and Asta, although not 100% similar, they can be switched with each other with not much detriment overall. Now let's talk about Bronya real quick, and we have Bronya's first team comp that I think is going to be much stronger in terms of Asta, and that is definitely the hyper carry role. A character that wants to have all the attention and all the buffs on a single unit. For example, we have here Sealy or Tingyun, who really wants to have as much buffs as they can to make use of their passive abilities to either one-shot a target or to gain stacks for his lightning lord, for example. So triple support for these 2 characters likely will work very well compared to an Asta who, if you're buffing 2 other supports, probably wouldn't really do that much damage. An example, one support could be Tingyun herself over here. So you buff them all up, and Tingyun as well. Tingyun provides energy recharge to either of them. I think it's a really strong team for Bronya to outperform Asta as well. And the next team, the second team that we have that I think is going to outperform Asta is definitely, since she's an early game one, Bronya is going to be definitely better in a slightly late game unit. And an example that I have is a character who scales off with crit damage similar to Bronya, and once he has enough crit, once he has that 100% crit rate, he actually benefits a lot from this additional crit damage as well. And Danheng is one of them. With that wind breaking to make up for the lack of wind breaking from Bronya, I do think that Danheng, or any character that wants to scale into the late game with a lot of crit rate, definitely is a very strong target as well. Danheng is probably one of them, but most DPSers generally want to scale with crit rate. The exception, of course, is Yanqing, who has a very high amount of crit rate early on, and he can make use of Bronya very quickly already as well, even in the early game. The next character that will fill a slot that works very well with Bronya, for example, is a very slow character like Clara, who really appreciates being boosted up to the front to maybe use her ultimate or to use a normal attack, her skill, etc., and then have that massive amounts of damage buff to proc her counter attacks later on and stuff like that. And the last kind of character that works really well is, for example, if you're already running a speed down AoE unit like Welt, he's going to work really well because you don't need that AoE speed buff when you are kind of slowing down the enemies. It's like a proxy for speed up, speed down the enemies in your relative speed terms. So I think, and this is a functioning team, I think it's really strong as well. I think Tingyun is not really in a competitive role versus both of them, as Tingyun offers more of energy as well as attack buffing, whereas these characters here rely more on turn manipulation in terms of speed, while also providing, all of them providing damage buffs as well. All 3 are good, and in my opinion, I'm going to be building all 3 for my personal account, but if you don't have the resources, or maybe you like certain other characters like maybe Kafka or Sealy, you might be moving another way and want to focus on one of them, and I hope these thoughts give you a clearer idea of which one you want to allocate resources on. I hope you don't have to choose between waifus, and thank you so much for watching. You might be interested in these 2 other videos which I talk on the other classes as well to get us started in Honkai Star Rail. Thank you so much for watching, and see you in the next video.